All right, so large language models are advanced AI systems that can process and generate human-like text. They're built on neural networks that have been trained on massive amounts of text data, allowing them to understand and generate language with remarkable sophistication, right? And we all have used it, right, in the form of ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude or Copilot, Gemini, whatever, whatever is our platform of choice. We know how this thing works. So the transformer architecture, introduced in 2017, pretty much revolutionized natural language processing. It is the foundation for LLMs. It's at its core, the transformer uses a unique approach to process text by looking at all the words in a sequence simultaneously, right? Rather than processing them one after the other sequentially like it used to in the earlier days, right? So this parallel processing makes transformers both more efficient and better at understanding context, okay? Now, the self-attention mechanism is perhaps the most innovative aspect of transformers. It allows the model to weigh the importance of different words in relation to each other when processing text. For example, in the sentence, the cat sat on the mat because it was comfortable, right? Self attention helps the model understand that it refers to mat by creating connections between these words. So each word in a sentence gets assigned attention scores in relationship to every other word. So creating a rich web of contextual understanding. So the way self-attention works is through three components: queries, keys, and values. Each word is transformed into these three vectors, and the interaction between queries and keys determines how much attention should be paid to different parts of the input, right? So this mechanism is computed multiple times in parallels. It's called heads, allowing the model to capture different types of relationships simultaneously. All right. So pre-training and fine-tuning represent two crucial phases in developing LLMs. So during pre-training, the model learns general language understanding from vast amounts of text data. So common pre-training tasks include predicting masked words in sentences or predicting the next word in a sequence. This phrase is this phase is computationally intensive and requires significant resources, but it gives the model a broad foundation of language knowledge. All right. So let's talk about how LLMs process information through these key stages and explain each part of the process in detail. Okay. So LLMs function using a complex neural network structure that processes text through several distinct layers and stages. So let me walk through each stage. All right. So tokenization is the first step where text is broken down into smaller units called tokens. These aren't just words. They can be subwords, characters, or even punctuation marks. For example, the word understanding might be broken into under and standing as separate tokens. This helps the model handle vocabulary more efficiently and deal with new or uncommon words. So the tokenizer uses a predefined vocabulary and rules to consistently split text into these manageable pieces. Okay, so that's tokenization. So embedding is where these tokens are converted into numerical vectors. So essentially translating text into a format that computers can process. Okay. So each token gets transformed into a high dimensional vector, often several hundred dimensions, where similar words end up close to each other in this mechanical space. For instance, dog and puppy would have similar vector representations, while dog and computer would be far apart. This creates a rich representation that captures semantic relationships between words. All right. Self-attention is where the model processes these embeddings to understand context and relationships between different parts of the text. So each token can attend to all other tokens in the input, with the strength of attention determined by how relevant they are to each other. For instance, in the cat caught a mouse because it was hungry. Self-attention helps determine that it refers to cat by creating a strong attention connections between these words, right? This happens through the calculation of query, key, and value vectors for each token, which are used to compute attention scores. Now, decoding is the final stage where the model generates output. During decoding, the model uses all the processed information to predict the next token in the sequence. This process is iterative, right? So happens over and over and again. So each generated token becomes part of the input for the next prediction. The model uses what's called a softmax. It's a function to convert its internal calculations into probability distributions over possible next tokens, and then selects the tokens based on these probabilities. So throughout this process, there are several important supporting mechanisms. For example, what is called position encodings that help the model understand word, or multiple layers of processing that allow the model to build up increasingly sophisticated representations. Residual connections that help maintain information flow through the deep network. And layered normalization that keeps the signal stable as it moves through the network. All right, so let's talk about these important evaluation metrics for text generation and summarization. Okay, so RUSE, or recall-oriented understudy for gisting evaluation, is a set of metrics that evaluate generated text by comparing it with reference text. Okay, so it evaluates generated text and compares it with the reference text. So it measures how many overlapping units, like words or phrases, appear in both the generated and reference text. And there are several variants to RUSE. So there is RUSE N, measures n-gram overlap. For example, RUSE 1 looks at single words, while RUSE 2 examines pairs of consecutive words. And if a generated summary contains many of the same words or phrases as the reference summary, it gets a higher RUSE score. Okay, so basically, if a generated summary contains many of the same words or phrases as the reference summary, it gets higher score. Okay, RUSE L considers the longest common subsequence between the generated and reference text. Okay, which helps evaluate sentence structure and word order, while also allowing for some flexibility in how phrases are expressed. So that's RUSE, or some people call it Rouge. I actually used to call it Rouge, but it's RUSE. So, okay. Next is bilingual evaluation understudy, or BLEU. Okay. BLEU was originally designed for machine translation, but it is now used broadly in text generation. It focuses on precision by checking how many phrases in the generated text appear in the reference text. So unlike RUSE, which emphasizes recall, finding reference content in the generation, BLEU emphasizes precision, ensuring generated content matches the reference. Okay. So BLEU has some key characteristics. Okay. It uses a modified precision that prevents inflation from repeated words. Okay. It applies brevity. It applies a brevity penalty to prevent very short outputs from getting artificially high scores. Okay. And it typically combines the scores from different n-gram lengths, usually 1 to 4. And BERT score is a more recent metric that leverages contextual embedding from BERT to evaluate text similarity. So instead of exact matches, it measures semantic similarity between generated and reference text. So this means it can recognize when different words express the same meaning. For example, if the reference uses automobile and the generation uses car, BERT score would recognize these as similar. Okay, while rouge and blue would count them as different. So BERT scores advantages in, basically are better handling of paraphrasing and synonyms, consideration of word importance and context, a stronger correlation with human judgments in many cases, and more robust to minor variations in expressions, right? So each of these metrics, rouge and blue and BERT score, has its strength and is often used in combination with others for a more complete evaluation, okay? All right, so let's talk about some key concepts in LLM training and optimization. So domain-specific training involves adapting a general purpose language model to excel in particular fields or industries. So, previously I've given an example of a law firm trying to do something very specific with the cases or the kind of law they practice, right? Same in the healthcare or education or sports, right? So this process uses specialized data sets relevant to the target domain, like medical literature for healthcare LLMs, right? Or legal documents for legal applications. For example, a model might be trained on medical journals and clinical notes to better understand medical terminology and reasoning. Okay. And bias reduction focuses on minimizing unfair prejudices in model outputs. There are several approaches, carefully curating training data to ensure diverse representation, implementing a specific debiasing techniques during training, regular testing and monitoring for biased outputs, and adding explicit constraints to prevent harmful stereotypes. Okay. And enhanced personalization allows models to adapt to individual users' needs and preferences, right? For example, learning from users' interactions, maintaining context about user preferences, adapting response style and complexity to user needs, right? Understanding user-specific terminology and references. All right, so instruction tuning is a process of training models to better follow specific instructions and commands. This involves training on instruction response pairs, teaching models to understand task context, improving task completion accuracy, enhancing the model's ability to handle complex multi-step instructions. Right? And then you have RLHF, or reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is a technique where human feedback guides the model improvements, right? This process works like this. Model generates responses. Humans rate these responses. These ratings train a reward model. The model is fine-tuned using reinforcement learning to maximize this reward. This helps align model behavior with human preferences and values. So transfer learning lets models apply knowledge from one task to another. This works in several stages, like pre-training on a large general data set, and fine-tuning on a specific task, and adapting learned features to new but related problems. For example, a model trained on English might transfer some language understanding capabilities when learning French, right? So each of these techniques play a crucial role in developing more capable and responsible AI systems.